Settle down. Feel the weight of your blanket, the stillness in the room. Tonight we drift quietly, slowly, into moments when a single human mistake bent history. Not loud battles, not shouting kings, just small choices made in lantern light that sent ripples through centuries. You won't just hear about them. You will be there. You will walk the dust of old streets, feel the rough weave of a cloak against your skin, smell the smoke of cooking fires. And if your eyes close as you travel, that's all right. Let the story hold you. Breathe in. Let's begin. You are standing on the edge of a market town, somewhere in the wide Mongol steppe. The wind tastes of dry grass and distant rivers. Around you, merchants hum low songs as they unpack bolts of faded silk and stacks of felt boots. A bell on a camel's harness chimes softly, just once like a memory. You wipe your hands on your tunic and squint against the sun. You feel the vibration of machinery through the soles of your shoes, the faint tang of hot plastic in the air. A probe, delicate and costly, is speeding toward Mars, its path determined by calculations everyone trusted. But someone mixed up imperial units with metric ones. You can feel the tension in the room, though no one is shouting. One man rubs his eyes, another stirs cold coffee. On the monitor, a line curves in a way it should not, a trajectory too shallow, too strange. You lean closer. A mistake so ordinary, like misreading a recipe, and yet somewhere far out in the dark, a fragile machine is drifting off its path, burning into nothing, carrying with it years of work and countless quiet nights like this one. You hear someone curse softly under his breath, but the room remains calm like a classroom after the teacher has left. You close your eyes and feel the hum of the air, conditioning the weight of failure settling in with the dust. When you open them, you are walking through a quiet village in the Vietnamese countryside in the mid-20th century. The earth is damp from last night's rain. Frogs croak in the ditches, and women bend over rice paddies, their conical hats glistening under the sun. The rhythm of daily life is slow and constant. Water scooped from ditches, children laughing, the smell of boiled sweet potatoes wafting from a small house. But rumors pass like shadows. Decisions made in faraway offices, plans drawn on maps by men who have never stood barefoot. In a paddy will soon turn these fields into something else entirely. You stand in the soft mud, feeling it squeeze between your toes, and you listen as an old man speaks quietly of troops moving, of borders, shifting, of leaders who never saw this village. The war that comes will be fed by miscalculations and pride, by a failure to see the ground beneath one's feet. You step away, the dragonflies scattering before you. Then you are in a Parisian drawing room in 1919. The air smells of dust and ink, the walls lined with books and fading maps. Men in dark suits lean over a table, their voices polite, almost bored. A treaty is being written, its words sharp, even as they are spoken softly. Outside, children play with hoops in the street, oblivious. Inside, a nation is being humiliated, a future anger planted quietly, almost gently with every signature. You pour tea for one of the delegates and listen to the scratch of a fountain pen on paper, and you wonder if they feel the tremor of what they are doing. They do not. And so years later, when tanks roll and cities burn, these words will be remembered as seeds of it all. The room grows dim, and the faint evening light flickers against polished wood. Time carries you on to another corridor, this one echoing with the distant sound of chanting. You are inside the Forbidden City during the last days of the Ming Dynasty. Courtiers shuffle past their robes, whispering against polished tiles. A minister bows low before the emperor, his eyes steady, though he knows the treasury is nearly empty. Outside the gates, farmers starve quietly, but inside decisions are made as though the empire is eternal. You move among them unseen, feeling the weight of their calm arrogance, their assumption that nothing can truly collapse. But mistakes pile like grains of sand, each one small, until the ground shifts. You step out onto a balcony and look over the rooftops, the lanterns glowing like embers, and you sense the quiet before a storm no one here seems to notice. The air is still heavy with the scent of incense. And now you are back in your own room, or maybe still traveling hard to say. The thread through all these places is the same small choices, overlooked errors, misjudgments made by tired hands and ordinary minds. You feel them around you like a soft wind brushing your skin. The night deepens calm and wide, and the stories drift on, waiting. You linger in that stillness, as though you have all the time in the world, and then the air shifts once more. You are standing on a quiet road in ancient Rome, early morning mist curling around your ankles. The paving stones are cool under your sandals. Merchants are setting out figs and baskets of olives, their voices soft and unhurried. In the distance, soldiers march their steps, steady the sound, echoing like a drumbeat through the narrow streets. You catch sight of a man in a simple cloak, Publius Varus, his face calm, almost serene. He is following a guide he trusts, a local noble named Arminius, who speaks softly and gestures toward a dark line of forest ahead. You walk with them, the cool, damp air clinging to your skin, the scent of pine needles sharp. The road narrows the trees close in, and you notice how quiet the birds have become. The soldiers talk in low voices, complaining about the mud on their boots, about missing home. They do not know they are being led into a trap. You pause to tie the leather thong of your sandal and look around, sensing something wrong, but the column presses on, disappearing into the dense green. Later, as rain begins to fall, you stand on the edge of that forest and feel the silence. You will not see the ambush itself, but you will feel the weight of the mistake, trust placed in the wrong hands, thousands of lives lost, and an empire's dreams of expansion quietly buried beneath dripping leaves and wet soil. Time drifts again, and you are now walking through the streets of Paris in the spring of 1940. The air smells of chestnut blossoms and fresh bread from a corner bakery. You step around puddles left by last night's rain, and you hear distant voices discussing the Maginot Line, that great fortress stretching along the border, built with so much hope. In a cafe, men smoke quietly, believing the line will hold that the Ardennes forest is too thick for armies to cross. You lean on the railing of a bridge and watch the Seine flow beneath you, steady and calm, unaware of the plans being drawn elsewhere. And when the mistake is revealed, when troops pour through where no one thought they would, you are back in that cafe, the scent of coffee still rich in the air, listening to whispers that sound like disbelief. You trace your finger along the table's worn edge and think of how often certainty turns out to be thin as paper. The scene fades, and you find yourself in a factory in the early 20th century. The air is thick with the scent of oil and metal filings. You wipe your hands on your trousers, feeling the grit cling to your skin. In a corner, a man named Thomas Midgley adjusts a pipe, his brow furrowed in thought. You can hear the rhythmic hiss of steam, the distant clatter of machines. He believes he is solving a problem, smoothing out the rough knock in engines. He does not know that the lead he pours into fuel will poison air and earth for decades. You move past him, the light from high windows catching dust motes in the air, and you sense the weight of unintended consequences. He hums softly to himself, unaware, while outside children play hopscotch in a yard that smells faintly of gasoline. Years later, he will work on cooling systems, inventing substances that seem like magic, harmless and clean, until they rise quietly into the sky and gnaw at the planet's protective shield. And you, still moving softly through time, step away from that factory into a different hum, a room filled with soft Russian voices and the faint smell of smoke. It is 1986, near midnight in Chernobyl. You are inside a control room, panels lit with small bulbs that blink calmly. Technicians move slowly, their movements methodical. One scratches his chin and mutters a calculation. Another adjusts his cap, stifling a yawn. You stand by the window, feeling the faint vibration of distant turbines through the floor. The night is calm, deceptively calm. A test is being run, small adjustments, made procedures bent for convenience. Someone signs off without thinking too hard. Someone else hesitates, then nods. The hum grows louder, then softer again. And when you look out the window, hours later, the sky glows faintly at the horizon, as if dawn has arrived too soon. In the distance, you hear dogs barking, and the night air carries the metallic tang of something gone wrong. But still in the control room, someone pours tea, careful not to spill, as if routine can protect them from consequence. You step away, the taste of smoke lingering in your throat. And now, centuries back, you walk among scrolls and ink once more this time, in a dim monastery high in the Alps. A monk carefully copies an old text, his hands steady, despite the cold that seeps through the stone walls. You feel the rough wool of your robe, the faint ache in your knees from hours of kneeling. Behind you, a novice trips and spills a jar of ink across a stack of parchments. He stammers an apology, and the abbot sighs, waving him away. Lost are weeks of work, but no one thinks beyond the day's labor. It is such a small mistake. Yet you look at the ruined words and wonder what knowledge has just been swallowed forever by black ink and silence. Time moves once more, carrying you to a summer morning in 1960s Pyongyang. You stand in the sunlit courtyard of a ministry building, listening to the shuffle of papers and the distant calls of street vendors. Kim Jong-nam is nearby, his face lit by a quiet smile as he speaks to a colleague about new ideas about modernizing systems. He is a man who believes in small changes, gentle reforms. You walk with him later, past low walls lined with apricot trees, the air rich with their sweet scent. A caravan arrives slow and creaking its wheels, leaving shallow scars in the packed earth. You help unload crates of spices you've never smelled before, warm and sharp, filling the air with a sweetness that makes you think of bread. No one here knows that these merchants are riding toward disaster. To you, they're just men with tired smiles and cracked lips counting coins under the shadow of a crumbling wall. Days later, whispers reach the market. The governor of a nearby city has seized a caravan. Not just the goods, he has taken lives too. You sit by a low fire that night, chewing hard bread, staring at the sparks. An envoy is sent to speak with the Shah, and you imagine him walking into the court. Careful, polite, believing words can fix anything. When the envoy's headless body returns, you feel the air change. No trumpets, no alarms, just a deeper silence. You notice fewer caravans on the road. The bread boy you used to see each morning is gone, his stall empty. When he disappears from public favor years later, after a strange incident with a false passport and a theme park, you will think of this quiet courtyard, the unspoken hopes drifting like pollen in the air. And through it all, through every corridor and marketplace and silent control room, the pattern emerges: human mistakes woven into the rhythm of daily life. You feel them around you like a soft tide, never rushing, just shaping the sand grain by grain. The night is deep now, the story's gentle in your mind. You can almost hear the steady breath of the centuries, calm and patient as you drift further into this journey. You rest in that courtyard for a long moment, letting the imagined scent of apricots linger on your tongue. Then time carries you softly onward. You are now standing on a quiet hillside in what will one day be called the American Midwest early morning mist rising from the grasses. The year is 1867, though the land itself feels timeless. You watch a Russian official roll up a map and hand it to an American diplomat. The breeze is cool, scented with wildflowers and damp earth. This is the sale of Alaska, a transaction so ordinary that neither man pauses to look out at the land beyond, where endless forests and hidden gold lie waiting. You walk behind them as they return to a small wooden building, feeling the soft crunch of gravel under your boots, thinking how strange it is to give up something so vast because you cannot imagine its worth. The ink dries on the contract, and the room falls quiet, except for the scratch of a pen returning to its holder. The land outside continues to hum with insects, unaware that it has just changed hands forever. Time shifts, and you are in ancient Babylon, standing in a half-finished courtyard where scribes are carving figures into wet clay tablets. The heat is heavy, pressing on your skin. You reach out and feel the grooves of a half-written law. Behind you, a junior scribe trips, dropping a tablet that shatters into pieces, and he sweeps them up, quickly embarrassed. No one notices that one of those fragments carried a measurement critical to irrigation plans. Months later, when canals flood and crops fail, no one thinks back to this moment, to the sound of clay breaking in a dusty room. You carry that sound with you as you step into a quiet hall in Beijing, centuries later, near the end of the Qing dynasty. Ministers stand in their elaborate robes, whispering into one another's ears. You stand behind a screen, feeling the smooth lacquer beneath your fingertips. Outside, the streets are full of vendors selling steamed buns, and lotus seed pace their calls soft and rhythmic. But in this room, decisions are made without urgency, letters from distant provinces left unread. Warnings of foreign ships in the harbor are met with faint smiles and dismissive waves. You step out onto a balcony, listening to the faint crackle of lanterns in the breeze, and wonder how many empires crumble, not with a shout, but with a shrug. Then you are in a cold stone chamber in medieval France, where a young king signs a decree allowing his armies to march before the harvest is in. You sit on a low stool near the wall, warming your hands by a small fire, watching the wax drip from tall candles. Outside, farmers in the fields look up at the sudden sound of hooves and wonder why soldiers have come before their grain is safe. Winter follows quickly, harder than expected, and the stored food is not enough. You are there when the soldiers return, months later, gaunt and silent, their armor dulled by frost. Another decision made in comfort, carried out by those who had no choice. And again, the scene fades. You're inside a modern conference room, now fluorescent lights humming softly, the table covered in blueprints. It is the 1970s, and engineers are discussing the design of a nuclear plant on a sleepy riverbank. You feel the smooth paper under your palm, the faint smell of graphite. Someone suggests cutting costs by reusing a certain valve, type someone else agrees. The decision is signed off in less than a minute. Years later, that valve will fail, and a quiet town will carry the weight of it for generations. But right now, the room is calm, and someone is pouring lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. You sit quietly listening, feeling the distant hum of machines in your feet. Time carries you again to a small stone bridge in ancient China during the Song dynasty. Merchants push handcarts loaded with porcelain, the wheels squeaking faintly. You walk among them, brushing your hand along the smooth rail of the bridge, watching a clerk tally cargo with quick strokes of a brush. He hesitates over one character, shrugs, and writes the wrong number. Months later, when the taxes are calculated, a shortfall appears, and suspicion spreads. The official responsible is punished, though the mistake was nothing more than a tired hand at dusk. You think of how small a choice can be, and how far it can travel. And now you find yourself in the cool shadow of a great European cathedral in the late Middle Ages. The builders are finishing a new spire, their voices echoing high above as you stand in the nave, smelling the faint tang of stone dust and incense. A master mason runs his hand along the column, nodding in satisfaction, not noticing the flaw deep inside the mortar. You sit on a worn pew and feel the hush of centuries around you. Decades later, in a quiet storm, that spire will fall, and no one will remember the mason's calm face or the soft rhythm of his chisel. You move again softly to a long wooden table in 1961, where a group of engineers hunch over blueprints of a spacecraft. You rest your head on your hand, listening to the faint scratch of pencils. They debate measurements and materials, their voices level, but fatigue has crept into the room like a fog. A decimal is misplaced, a stress tolerance overestimated. You think of the men and women who will step into that machine, trusting that every calculation was exact. You look out the window at the launch pad far away, the grass rippling under a breeze, and feel a quiet unease. And now you are walking through a foggy trench in 1914. The mud sucks at your boots. A lieutenant stands by a flickering lantern, scanning a map. You are close enough to see the ink smudges on the page, the nervous tremor in his hand. He gives an order to advance, not knowing the artillery is zeroed in on that very field. You follow the men as they step out into the gray light, feeling the drizzle on your face, the weight of the rifle on your shoulder. The mistake is not loud, it is a wrong turn, a misread line on a map, but it will cost more than anyone can repay. The scene fades, and you are now in a quiet train station in the late 1800s. A telegraph operator taps out a message, distracted by fatigue, and the soft whistle of the kettle behind him. One word is missed, another added. Far away, a meeting is scheduled at the wrong time, and two trains find themselves on the same track at dawn. You are there on the platform when news reaches the station, the morning light still pink, the pigeons still cooing overhead. And through each place you visit, the air carries the same gentle truth. History is not only built by great plans and loud victories, it is shaped again and again by small human mistakes, quiet, almost invisible, at first made in markets and palaces, in trenches, and libraries in control rooms and quiet fields. You feel them all settling around you, like a soft quilt, each thread a reminder of how fragile decisions can be. The night is deep now, your breath slow, your mind drifting. The next part of the journey waits patient and calm, and you understand in your bones how far an insult can travel. You can almost feel the ground tremble far away as an empire begins to rise in anger. But tonight in your little tent, the wind still hums through the grass, and the sky is a black bowl full of stars. Now you are far from the steppe. You are on the cold metal deck of a submarine, 1941, the Atlantic night, pressing in like a damp blanket. Your fingers trace rust on the railing. Inside the steel belly, men speak in whispers, their breaths mingling with the smell of diesel and bread gone stale. One sailor hums a tune under his breath, a lullaby soft and cracked with homesickness. You share a bunk with another man. You barely know his boots lined up neatly beside your own. When the alarms sound, there's no panic, just a shift in rhythm, like everyone taking one more deep breath. The submarine surfaces. You climb out, squinting at the searchlights of British ships. The cold bites your cheeks, but you keep your hands steady as you raise them in surrender. Later, you sit on the deck of a ship you've never seen before, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. You hear foreign voices, laughing softly as they carry strange machines out of the submarine's shadowed interior. You don't know it, but those machines will unravel secret codes and shape the war's quiet currents. You only know the night is calm and the ocean keeps breathing beneath you. And now the lantern light shifts again. You're in a narrow stone corridor, in a Byzantine palace, the air heavy with candle wax and ink. You carry a letter pressed against your chest, sealed with red wax. The emperor himself gave it to you, a list of trusted names whispered like a prayer. Your boots echo as you walk, your breath visible in the chill. When the letter is read far away, those names, people who thought they were safe, will be quietly erased from the world. You will never see it, but you will feel something change when your next message brings no reply. Time slides gently forward again. You are leaning against a concrete wall in East Berlin, the November air, damp and smelling faintly of coal smoke. You've come because someone whispered that travel restrictions were lifted, though no one is sure. The guards look at each other, their faces pale under the yellow streetlights. One finally steps aside. You step forward, breath caught in your chest, and feel the rough stone of the Berlin Wall under your fingertips as you pass. No gunfire, just the soft shuffle of boots and the sound of people laughing quietly, as though afraid to wake from a dream. And so you walk on through centuries of small choices. A single insult in a distant city, a quiet decision on a ship, a letter handed over in faith, a careless sentence at a press conference. You feel the dust on your hands. You hear the bells on the wind, and the night deepens around you, calm and wide. You linger in that Berlin night a little longer, feeling the damp air on your face. And then, as if drifting in a slow current, you find yourself far back in another age. The ground beneath your feet is warm and dry. You are walking through Alexandria, down a colonnaded street lined with low lanterns, the smell of papyrus dust and olive oil drifting on the breeze. The great library rises ahead, a quiet monument of scrolls and whispered ideas. You run your fingers along the cool stone, and the thought that knowledge could be lost forever has never occurred to you. Inside, scholars murmur over scrolls written in languages you do not recognize, their robes brushing the floor like the soft sweep of brooms. You pause by an alcove where a scribe dips a reed into dark ink, copying a text older than any empire. The air is heavy with candle smoke and the faint sweetness of beeswax. When the fire begins, it is not a roaring disaster, not at first. It is a careless spark, a small misunderstanding in the chaos of war. You smell the change before you see it, the acrid bite of smoke threading through the scrolls. People move slowly, almost dazed, lifting precious manuscripts in their arms, but there is nowhere safe to take them. You stand still, scrolls falling around you like autumn leaves, and you realize that centuries of human thought are curling into ash before your eyes. Later, long after the flames are gone, the ruins are quiet. You sift through the soot, with your hands feeling brittle fragments that crumble to nothing. No one meant for this to happen, but history is full of intentions that never mattered. Now the air shifts again, and you hear the slow creak of wooden wheels in a city far across the ocean. You're in New Orleans in 1803, though it does not feel important yet. The streets are narrow, lined with balconies, heavy with ironwork vines. You hear the slow drawl of French and Spanish mingling in the market. Somewhere a clerk is copying figures into a ledger, unaware that Napoleon, restless and distracted by European wars, has agreed to sell this entire vast territory. You sit on the edge of the Mississippi with your boots dangling in the brown water, thinking of how absurd it seems to trade away such a land for a handful of coins. Farmers nearby go about their work, feeding chickens, patching roofs, mending nets, never realizing that their country has changed while they stirred their soup. The sale is a mistake, born of urgency, born of a man who thought he needed quick money more than a continent. You breathe in the humid air and think of the thousands of lives that will be shaped by this quiet transaction. Time drifts again, and you are standing in a control room in 1999, fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. A group of engineers huddle over screens, their voices low, almost tired. You feel yourself leaving that train platform, as if stepping softly out of one dream into another. The air warms, carrying the scent of cooking rice and wet earth. You are standing in a small riverside village in southern China in the late 1950s. The sun is barely up, and you watch women sweep the packed dirt courtyards With handmade brooms, their movements slow and steady, the bristles whispering across the ground. Chickens peck at crumbs near your feet. A child leans against the doorway of a house, chewing on a piece of sugarcane, his face sticky with juice. The village is alive in its quiet way, but there is a new urgency in the air. Posters line the walls, painted in bright reds and yellows, urging the people to destroy the four pests: rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. You pick up a bamboo pole and join a group of villagers banging pans, waving cloths, shouting softly to keep the birds from landing. The air fills with frantic wings, the trees alive with movement. You watch as land appears weeks later, green and bright against the horizon. The crew shouts softly in awe, but you stand in stillness, knowing he has not found Asia at all. You walk through the sand, feeling it warm between your toes, and watch as they kneel in prayer, unaware of how this mistake will echo through centuries, reshaping continents and lives in ways they cannot begin to imagine. The ocean breeze carries the faint cry of gulls, soothing and endless. Time folds like cloth, and you step into the cold interior of a German conference room in 1919. The table is long and polished, the room smelling faintly of ink and damp wool. A clock ticks steadily. You sit quietly in a chair at the end, watching as pages of the Treaty of Versailles are passed along, signatures carefully added with pens that glint in the muted light. Outside, snow begins to fall soft as flour. The men inside speak in measured tones, believing they are ensuring peace. You see their tired faces, their lips pressed thin, their eyes not meeting. You glance toward the window, watching the snowflakes melt against the glass. Years later, when streets erupt with marching boots and banners, you will remember the soft scrape of pen on paper, the sound of a chair sliding back, the faint smell of old wood. You step out into the snow, the hush of it calming your breath. Then you are in a dark forest in medieval Europe, where torchlight flickers against the damp trunks of trees. You stand among a group of men who call themselves assassins, though tonight they are just weary figures crouched around a fire, sharpening blades that catch the light like dull stars. You feel the rough texture of wool gloves against your fingertips, the cold seeping through your boots. They speak in low voices about their mission, a plan born of pride and poor information. When the time comes, their target is already gone, and their attack cuts down the wrong men. You help drag a wounded companion back through the underbrush, the smell of pine heavy around you. Months later, the villagers whisper of their failure, and you remember the way the fire crackled, the way someone offered you a piece of stale bread with a crooked smile, unaware of the error that would cost them everything. The forest hums with insects, and you move on. A few heartbeats later, you are sitting on a low stone wall in the heart of Rome, the scent of roasted chestnuts in the air. The emperor's advisors are arguing softly over maps spread on a marble table, their words blending into the murmur of the city. A pigeon lands near your feet, pecking at crumbs, its feathers ruffling in the breeze. They are discussing Germania, that distant land beyond the river, whether to send more troops or hold the line. One man insists on trust, another nods in agreement, and you see the subtle mistake forming like a crack in glass. You watch their fingers trace routes that will lead men to their deaths. But here in the courtyard, it is peaceful. A woman laughs softly as she carries a basket of figs. A fountain gurgles. You sit and peel a fig, feeling its sticky sweetness on your fingers, while history takes another quiet turn. The wind carries you further to a concrete hallway in a military base during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The fluorescent lights hum above you, and a guard stands at his post, scanning the dark fence line. You lean against the wall, the air cool and dry. A shadow moves beyond the fence, a bear, though no one knows that yet. The guard tightens his grip on his rifle, thinking of sabotage of distant orders. An alarm is pressed, a signal spreads, and suddenly pilots are running their boots, thudding softly against the floor as they hurry to planes armed with weapons that could end everything. You watch from a doorway as an officer, calm but urgent, drives onto the runway, waving his arms, stopping what might have been. The pilots climb down from their cockpits, breathing hard, their eyes wide. Later, when the hallway is quiet again, you stand where you were and hear only the soft hum of the lights. Time moves gently, and you are seated in a grand hall in Constantinople. The year is 1453. The room is lit with hundreds of candles, their flames steady, their wax dripping slowly onto bronze holders. You listen as an engineer named Orban speaks of a massive cannon, one that could shatter walls, thought impenetrable. You watch the Emperor's face, tired, uncertain. He shakes his head, unable to fund such a project. You feel the faint vibration of carts in the courtyard outside, wheels creaking, horses snorting. Months later, you stand outside the city as the Ottomans roll that very cannon into place, the ground trembling under its weight. You run your hand along the ancient walls, feeling the cool stone, knowing they will not stand much longer. The air smells of dust and approaching rain. Through each place you move, there is no rush, only the steady rhythm of daily life against the backdrop of decisions that reshape everything. You find yourself now in a village in Eastern Europe, the year 1938. You stand by a wooden fence, listening to the cluck of hens and the laughter of children. Inside a nearby office, leaders sign an agreement they think will keep peace, carving up lands that belong to others. You look down at your boots, dusted with dry soil, and think of how those lines on maps will uproot families, send trains across borders, set in motion a war greater than they can imagine. The air smells faintly of hay and smoke, and someone hands you a slice of bread, still warm from the oven. You take a bite, tasting the soft crumb, feeling history turn quietly in your mouth. You wander on, finding yourself in a moonlit camp on the edge of the Russian steppe. Men sit around a fire, polishing weapons, whispering about orders that make no sense. Supplies are low, maps outdated, yet the command has been given. You stare into the flames, watching the sparks rise and feel the cold press in. A young soldier hums softly to himself, rocking gently, the melody sad and sweet. You close your eyes and imagine the steppe in spring, the grass rolling like waves. When you open them, the fire has burned low, and the night feels heavier. And still you walk through the halls of palaces and the streets of markets, across bridges and under lantern light, carrying with you the quiet weight of mistakes woven into ordinary days. The world softens around you, each scene fading gently into the next, until all that remains is the slow rhythm of your own breath and the calm hum of history, moving like a lullaby through the dark. The soft hum of history carries you gently onward. Now you are standing in a candlelit chamber within the ancient city of Constantinople, but centuries before its final siege. Outside, the Bosporus waters are still and dark, and the scent of salt drifts in through narrow windows. A scholar sits cross-legged on a cushion, copying a fragile Greek manuscript onto fresh parchment. You are close enough to hear the whisper of the quill. The letters curl across the page, steady and sure. Behind him, a stack of scrolls leans precariously. A servant brushes past, and with a soft rustle, one tumbles into a brazier. The scholar gasps, then presses his palm to his forehead. By morning, the ash will be swept away without comment. You crouch to pick up a fragment, the edges warm against your fingertips. You feel the sting of loss, not in drama, but in a quiet ache that hums under your breath. The city outside continues, as it always has. Bread sellers calling softly, cats winding between legs, the lapping of oars in the distance. Time folds and you feel the cool linen of your sleeve brushing your skin as you walk the shaded colonnades of a Roman bathhouse. Steam drifts lazily, curling like silver threads in the air. Men recline on benches discussing politics in low tones. One of them, an official, makes a note to divert funds from a bridge project to a more immediate favor for a friend. You sit beside the pool, letting your toes sink into the warm water. Outside, merchants load carts, unaware that in a season the half-finished bridge will collapse under too much weight, cutting off trade routes, changing settlements, reshaping maps. You stand and let the mist cling to your hair, watching lantern light shimmer on the water's surface, and you think of how choices made in murmured conversations ripple outward. A soft breeze moves through time, and you are suddenly on a quiet hilltop, overlooking a French village in the 18th century. Lavender grows thick along the paths, and the air is rich with its fragrance. In the distance, the village square is alive with the small sounds of market day, the clink of coins, the shuffle of baskets. In a nearby hall, tax collectors meet under heavy beams. A clerk, young and nervous, mistranscribes a figure, adding a zero where there should be none. You see his brow furrow, his lips pressed tight as he hands over the paper. No one notices. When the new tax is announced, the village will groan under the weight unrest, brewing slowly, softly, like dough rising in the night. You crouch among the lavender, feeling the earth cool and damp, listening to the bees hum, and you sense the beginning of something that will grow larger than anyone here can imagine. The world shifts, and you are walking across damp grass in the early morning fog of England, 1845. Potato plants stretch out in green rose dew, clinging to their leaves. You kneel, brush aside a leaf, and see the black rot spreading quietly, an omen ignored until too late. It seems harmless at first. Later, standing in the fields, you notice the insects thick as smoke, eating their way through young shoots of grain. The sound is soft, but constant, like rain that never ends. You look at your hands, at the dust that clings to them, and wonder how a plan meant to protect food could bring such quiet devastation. In the distance, the river glints under the sun, unconcerned. Time bends and carries you elsewhere. You find yourself in a quiet office in Washington, D.C., the year 1972. The room smells faintly of old paper and fresh coffee. Stacks of documents lie on the table, and outside the window you see cars drifting along wet streets after a summer storm. Inside, men speak in low voices about a break-in, about what can be hidden, about what the public will never know. You sit in a corner chair, the upholstery rough against your palm, and watch someone cross out a line on a report. A decision is made to cover a mistake with another mistake. Officials far away will underestimate the coming famine, dismiss reports, delay aid. You watch a farmer run his hand through his hair, his face calm, but lined with worry. His wife stands in the doorway of a stone cottage, wiping her hands on her apron. Children chase a dog through the mist, laughter ringing like chimes. The sun breaks through the fog for a moment, lighting the fields in soft gold, and you wonder how such a simple plant could carry so much weight. Time slides forward again, and you find yourself in a Parisian printing house in 1788. The press clanks rhythmically, each turn of the wheel releasing a soft hiss. Sheets of pamphlets stack high ink, drying in the warm air. A typesetter scratches his head, rearranging letters, and accidentally switches two words that will change the meaning of a speech. The pamphlet spreads through cafes and markets whispered about by candlelight, fueling discontent in ways its author never intended. You stand by the door, the smell of ink thick in your nostrils, feeling the vibration of the press through the wooden floorboards. Outside, a flower seller hums a lullaby, brushing petals from her apron. You walk on. You are in Kyoto now, in the soft rain of the Edo period. The narrow street is lined with wooden lanterns that glow like warm embers. A tea house door slides open, and a geisha bows slightly, her movement smooth as a river. You step inside, the tatami mats cool under your feet. In a quiet corner, a scroll hangs with calligraphy, its ink strokes steady and bold. A daimyo speaks softly, his tone mild, as he orders a decision that will send his samurai to the wrong border, leaving another undefended. You sip the tea offered to you, the bitter flavor grounding you in this moment. Outside, the rain continues to fall steady and calm, washing the tiled roofs. Later, when word comes of defeat, no one will think back to the gentle clink of porcelain cups in this small tea house. The lantern light dims, and you step again through time. Now you are in a Soviet design bureau in the 1950s. The room smells of cigarette smoke and machine oil. Drafting tables are covered with blueprints, rulers, compasses. A young engineer yawns, rubs his eyes, and draws a line half a millimeter off. No one notices. When the spacecraft is built, that line will cause a seam to fail, a valve to misalign. You stand by the window watching snow fall outside, the world hushed. Someone pours you a glass of hot tea in a thin glass cup, and you wrap your hands around it, feeling the warmth seep into your skin. The conversation around you is gentle, technical, confident. You hear laughter. You would never guess how fragile their success really is. Time shifts, and you are standing on a rocky coast of Ireland, the wind tugging at your coat. You watch as men hammer wooden beams into place, building a lighthouse where so many ships have been lost. A foreman misreads a plan, placing a critical stone out of alignment. Years later, in a storm, the structure will collapse, and you will remember the way the waves sounded that day, the slow rhythm against the rocks, the smell of salt thick in your lungs. You look up at the gray sky and feel the sting of rain on your cheeks. Another step, another place. You're in a warm room in Philadelphia, 1790. Candles flicker, casting long shadows. Papers are spread across a polished desk. The men debate taxation representation, the balance between states. A clerk writes down the wrong figure, and no one notices, distracted by exhaustion. The compromise reached here will shape a government, but also sow seeds of future strife. You feel the heat from the candle, the wax dripping slowly onto your skin, the weight of that choice sinking into the polished wood. Outside, a horse snorts, shaking off rain. The ink dries, and you keep moving, soft and unseen. You are in a Japanese naval yard in the early 20th century. The smell of tar and fresh paint hangs in the air. Workers hum old songs as they bolt plates, stitch sails, polish brass. An officer walks past, glancing at a blueprint, nodding, not noticing the calculation error that will leave a ship vulnerable. You step aboard, feeling the wood flex under your weight, and listen to the creak of ropes and the soft chatter of men who think they are building perfection. The tide laps gently at the shore. Years later, when the ship founders, you will remember the sound of those songs, the way the evening light glowed against the water. Through all these places, through all these quiet rooms and markets and fields, you feel the same soft thread weaving through human life errors, born of tired eyes, misplaced trust, small misjudgments. They are not loud, not violent in the moment. They are as gentle as a pen stroke, as quiet as a lantern's flicker. And yet, they change everything. You feel yourself returning slowly to the present, carrying the calm weight of these stories. The night deepens around you, and your breath slows steady and peaceful as history hums softly in your ear. The air feels heavy, thick with a tension no one names. Months later, you sit in the same chair as hearings unfold, the voices now louder, the papers scattered. A presidency that once seemed untouchable crumbles softly under the weight of quiet errors and secret choices. Outside, the cicadas sing in the warm night, steady and slow. And then you are not in an office, but in a field of snow. The sky is pale, the air so cold, it bites at the inside of your nose. It is winter near Moscow, 1941. You walk among soldiers huddled around small fires, their breath hanging in the air like smoke. They talk about home, about bread, about the taste of clean water. They do not speak of orders that brought them here without winter clothing, without enough supplies. You stand in a trench and feel the crunch of frozen earth under your boots, listening to the muffled thud of distant artillery. The mistake was timing. Overconfidence, the belief that an army could take a city before the first snow. You rub your hands together, feeling the numbness creep in, and realize how slowly cold can kill. But even here, life persists. Someone is sewing a tear in his coat. Another shares a crust of bread. The sky deepens to indigo, and the cold thickens like glass around you. Time flows again, and you are walking through the streets of Tokyo in the 1940s. The air smells faintly of soy sauce and roasted chestnuts. Paper lanterns sway above narrow alleys, their light soft and golden. You stop at a small stall where a woman is folding origami cranes, the paper rustling softly in her hands. She gives you one with a shy smile. Above, planes pass silently. Decisions made far away in tall offices, filled with cigar smoke, have drawn the world into chaos. You hold the paper crane as the night grows darker, feeling its delicate wings tremble in the breeze. Later, when firestorms sweep through districts, you will think of this alley, the soft glow of lanterns, the taste of roasted chestnuts on your tongue. You step through another doorway, and the air is warm with candlelight. You are in a dim chamber beneath the streets of London in 1666. The air smells of bread yeast and smoke. A baker is stoking his oven, humming a tune. He wipes his hands on his apron, unaware that a spark has found its way to the piled kindling nearby. You feel the sudden shift in the air as smoke curls upward. He stamps it out, or thinks he has, and goes to bed. Later, you walk the narrow streets, the glow on the horizon growing brighter. The air filled with the faint crackle of distant flames. Horses whinny softly in their stalls, and people carry buckets of water with quiet desperation. The baker sleeps, unaware of the mistake that will etch his name into history. In the weeks that follow, you walk through the blackened ruins, feeling the crunch of ash beneath your boots, touching stone still warm to the touch. And still time carries you on. You are in a laboratory now, late evening, somewhere in the 19th century. The gas lights hum their glow, soft and golden. Papers are scattered on a table, formulas scrawled in ink that has bled into the fibers of the page. A young chemist leans back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He measures carefully, but a decimal is misplaced. The experiment bubbles softly, then stills. Nothing seems amiss. Decades later, the compound he has noted as harmless is revealed to be deadly. You look around the room at the rows of stoppered bottles, the faint scent of camphor and alcohol in the air, and think of how much we trust the smallest marks on a page. Then you step onto a hot plain in ancient Mesopotamia. The river glints nearby, slow and muddy. Farmers bend beneath the sun, guiding water into canals, the mud squelching under their feet. An overseer counts sacks of grain, frowning, as he adds figures on a clay tablet. You see the numbers, you see the error, but you say nothing. Later, the temple receives less than expected, and punishments fall. You walk through the market that evening, past stalls of figs and dates, and think of how fragile trust can be. Time moves like water, and you are standing in a German office in 1944. The blinds are half closed, the light muted. A stack of reports lies on a desk. A general taps his pen against his teeth, debating where the Allies might land. Maps are spread wide corners, weighted with cups of tea gone cold. You stand at his shoulder, smelling the faint scent of leather and tobacco, listening as he chooses to reinforce the wrong coast. In that quiet moment, You sense the weight of every future. That choice will shape the lives saved and lost by a judgment made in a room like this. And then softly you are on a hillside in Greece 323 BC. The evening air is warm, scented with thyme and dust. A man lies on a low couch, his breathing shallow. Alexander the Great, they call him, though here in this moment, he is only a man sweating under thin linen. Around him, generals whisper, eyes darting, waiting for a name he will not give. You stand in the corner, feeling the cool stone beneath your hand, and watch them leave one by one, the uncertainty already carving cracks in the empire. Later, as cities rise and fall, you will think of this warm room, the soft buzz of insects outside the stillness, of a man who never imagined the chaos he would leave behind. And through every age you feel yourself wandering quietly, an unseen witness to choices that seemed small, even trivial, but turned out to be stones that sent ripples through oceans of time. The air is calm now, the night deeper, and you feel yourself drifting closer to sleep, wrapped in the soft murmur of history's mistakes. You drift on through the quiet currents of time, and the next place you find yourself is far from Greece, far from Europe, in the dim pre-dawn of a Caribbean harbor in 1492. The air is thick with salt, and tar ropes creak softly against wooden masts. You are barefoot on the deck of a ship, watching Christopher Columbus lean over a chart lit by a small lantern. He murmurs measurements to himself, his finger tracing a line across the inked ocean. You watch him pause, his brow furrowed, but he does not see the flaw in his numbers. He believes the world is smaller than it is. Around you, sailors sit cross-legged on the deck, chewing on hard biscuits, their teeth working slowly. Someone hums a hymn, another mends a torn sleeve. You lean against the railing, feeling the slight sway beneath you, thinking how ordinary this morning feels. You feel yourself stepping softly out of that naval yard, and the hum of history folds you into another place. The air is thick, with the smell of pine resin and damp soil. You are standing at the edge of a Scandinavian forest in the year 1710, watching farmers fell trees for ships. Their axes move in a slow rhythm, each swing echoing through the cool morning. A foreman marks a shipment incorrectly, sending precious timber to the wrong port. Weeks later, a fleet waits without supplies, and plans change quietly, leading to defeat. But you are here in this quiet moment, watching the wood chips scatter like pale butterflies. The men laugh softly, speaking of wives and warm bread waiting at home. The mistake is invisible, a thread weaving unseen into the pattern of the future. The light changes and you are walking along a narrow canal in Amsterdam's 17th century, where barges glide like shadows on the water. You wipe the mist from your face with a rough sleeve and watch a soldier carve his initials into the wooden stock of his rifle, unaware of what waits ahead. You take another step through time and feel the soft give of a Persian carpet under your feet. You're in a quiet meeting room in Tehran in the mid-20th century. The ceiling fan turns slowly, stirring the scent of strong tea and old books. Officials speak softly about plans to shape the future of a nation, underestimating the people who live there. A sentence is left unclear, a promise left vague, and decades of unrest take root in that single hour. You sip tea from a small glass, its sweetness lingering on your tongue, and watch the sunlight shift through dusty shutters. In the distance, a call to prayer drifts across the city, soft and steady. Then you're on a windswept hill in Scotland, centuries earlier, grass moving like waves under a gray sky. A group of leaders gather in a stone tower, debating a treaty with tired voices. One man, cold and impatient, leaves out a critical clause. You hear the scratching of quills, the shuffle of papers. Outside, sheep graze calmly, bells chiming softly as they move. Later, when the misunderstanding sparks conflict, you will remember the smell of damp stone and the sound of wind rattling the shutters. You move on your feet, finding soft sand on a Pacific island during World War II. The tide is low, the air warm with salt and coconut. Soldiers build airstrips while locals watch from a distance silent. A supply officer miscalculates rations, and within weeks, the camp struggles quietly. You walk among them, feeling the grit between your toes, tasting the dry rice they offer you. They laugh softly at a joke you don't understand, and for a moment, the weight of the war feels far away. The sun sets, painting the sky in muted oranges and grays. Another step, and you are in the highlands of Peru, centuries ago, standing on a terrace overlooking rows of potatoes and maize. A scribe records tribute for an Inca official miscounting the baskets. Somewhere above, the sound of pan flutes drifts on the wind. The error ripples through a system that once ran like clockwork. You reach down and brush your hand across the plants, feeling the damp soil cling to your fingers. The villagers continue their work, unaware of how this small oversight will echo in the redistribution of food, in the quiet grumbling of hungry families. Time bends again, and you are in an Ottoman courtyard, the evening air rich with the scent of rosewater and grilled bread. An architect is presenting his plan for a new aqueduct. He gestures to the parchment, confident, but a single misdrawn measurement will lead to cracks that widen with each passing year. You walk beside the fountain in the courtyard, hearing the water murmur as lanterns sway overhead. In the distance, you hear soft laughter from a group of children chasing each other across the stones. Close your eyes for a moment, feeling the warm breeze. When you open them, you are in a modern conference room in the 1990s. Computer screens glow dimly in the half-light. A team of analysts study data on a looming financial crisis, but a column in the spreadsheet is wrong, hidden in plain sight. You stand behind them, hearing the steady click of keyboards, the muted hum of air conditioning. Someone stretches, yawns, and reaches for coffee. The room feels ordinary routine. Weeks later, the markets will falter, and the world will look for causes. But you will remember this quiet moment, the soft glow of screens, the smell of paper, the sound of someone tapping a pencil absent-mindedly against the desk. And again you drift, finding yourself at a harbor in Athens in the classical era. Ships bob gently on calm waters, their sails furled. A naval officer tallies supplies, misreading a shipment log. His fleet will set out without enough provisions, and many will not return. But now the harbor is calm, gulls crying softly, overhead fishermen mending nets on the shore. The sea breeze cools your face, and you watch the sunlight dance on the water. Then you are in a tiny workshop in Florence during the Renaissance. Brushes and pigments clutter the table, and the smell of linseed oil fills the air. An apprentice grinds pigment, while a master drafts plans for a cathedral dome. A single line in his notes is unclear, and centuries later, restorers will puzzle over how to follow it. You touch the edge of the canvas, feeling the rough weave under your fingertips, and listen to the distant sound of bells ringing the hour. And now you are in a colonial office in India, ceiling fans whirring slowly overhead. Officials debate borders, drawing lines with steady hands across maps they have only seen in books. They do not notice the villages they divide, the families they separate. Outside, the scent of spices drifts from a street market, warm and rich. You step onto the balcony, feeling the humid air cling to your skin, watching a child chase a goat down a narrow lane. Inside, the pens keep scratching decisions made in calm voices, but you sense the ache these lines will cause. Through it all, you remain quiet, an unseen guest in the rooms where history bends. The voices around you are soft, the details, ordinary dust motes in light, the creak of wood, the smell of bread cooling on a windowsill. Yet each choice, each overlooked detail, each tired calculation shifts the world in ways no one can predict. The night deepens further. You feel your breath slowing your mind, drifting between these places, each one as vivid as a dream. When you are ready, you will step onward again. The lantern glow fades, and you find yourself in a quiet courtyard in Baghdad during the height of the Abbasid Caliphate. The air is heavy with the scent of cardamom and distant cooking fires. You sit on a carved stone bench as a scholar reads aloud from a book of medicine, his voice calm, melodic. A scribe records his words, but he hesitates, mishears a dosage, writes it down with careful strokes. That single error will pass quietly through time, copied again and again, till centuries later, a healer in a distant village follows it, exactly never knowing. You close your eyes and hear the splash of a fountain, the laughter of children playing marbles in the dust nearby. You inhale slowly, feeling the warm night air settle around you like a blanket. Time turns, and you are in a cramped wooden office aboard a 17th century ship. The air is damp smelling of salt and lamp oil. A navigator leans over a chart, his fingers tracing coastlines under a wavering candle. He jots down a bearing in haste, ink blurring as the ship sways. You feel the pitch of the deck under your feet, hear the creak of ropes, the low groan of timbers. Outside, sailors hum softly as they mend a torn sail, unaware that the new course leads toward reefs hidden just beneath dark waters. You stay with them through the night, listening to the sea, whisper against the hull, until the first light touches the horizon. A step later, and you are seated on a low stone wall in ancient Jerusalem. Merchants in linen robes weave through narrow streets, calling out their wares. A Roman official sits beneath an awning reviewing census forms. He overlooks a family's entry, fails to record their household correctly. To him, it is nothing. To them, it changes where they travel, who they meet, the path their lives take. You watch dust rise from the streets as donkeys pass by, bells clinking softly, and you feel the faint warmth of sun on your skin. Then you are deep in a library in medieval Cordoba. The air smells of beeswax and ink. Scrolls are stacked in neat rows, some tied with faded ribbon. A young copyist works late, his eyes heavy candlelight flickering across his tired face. A single page falls unnoticed behind a shelf, carrying knowledge that will sleep in shadow for centuries. You bend down and see it lying in the dust, the script still dark and sharp. Outside, the night market hums softly with distant music and the murmur of voices. You let the page be knowing how fragile memory is. You move again and feel the dry heat of the Sahara. You sit beside a caravan leader, counting water skins. His math is wrong, but he nods to himself satisfied. The camels shift their bells, chiming softly. The wind carries the scent of sand and distant acacia. Days later, halfway across the desert, the caravan will slow ration water and whisper prayers under the same indifferent stars. But here now the night is calm, the fire's smoke rising straight into the sky. A breath later, you are in a small shop in Florence. The year is 1478. The air is rich with the smell of leather and dye. A merchant's apprentice notes a figure incorrectly in a ledger, not noticing until the end of the month. His master scolds him softly, but the damage is done, debts missed, trust shaken. You run your hand along a row of shoes, feeling the softness of well-worn leather, hearing the chatter of passers-by beyond the open door. The light falls gently through the window, and you think of how fragile fortunes are balanced on numbers written in haste. Time bends again, and you are crouched in the dust near a river in ancient Egypt. The Nile glimmers under the sun, and you can smell wet reeds and fish drying on wooden racks. A tax collector stands with a stylus and wax tablet, recording harvests from the fields. He looks tired, wipes sweat from his brow, and skips a name. The air is heavy with the smell of salt and tar mingled with the sweet smoke of peat fires. A merchant counts barrels of spices stacked on the dock, his hands trembling with fatigue. He signs the wrong document, ensuring only part of a shipment. When the storm sinks, his vessel, his fortune dissolves, and the market ripples in panic. You sit on a crate, feeling the wood rough against your palms, and watch gulls wheel above. The bells of a distant church toll softly, the rhythm as steady as your breath. The scene shifts to the edge of a desert. You are in ancient Persia now, beneath a sky so wide and blue it feels endless. The sand is hot under your sandals, the air buzzing with the faint hum of insects. Caravans move slowly, carrying water and grain to a distant city. A scribe records their loads in a ledger, wiping sweat from his brow. His mistake is a single line, but it will leave a garrison without supplies. The farmer bows low, saying nothing, but walks home with less than he deserves. You watch him step into his mud brick house, hear the soft murmur of his children, and feel the weight of how small an error can be. You move forward again into a dim Japanese storeroom in the 1700s. Rice barrels are stacked neatly, the scent of grain and earth heavy in the air. A clerk runs his finger along the rows, murmuring numbers under his breath. He counts twice, still wrong. Months later, a famine relief ship is delayed because the storehouse was thought to be full. Outside, lanterns swing gently in the evening breeze, and you watch the silhouette of a woman carrying a child across the yard, the child's laughter soft and high. Now you stand on a wide stone terrace in Machu Picchu centuries ago. The air is crisp, the mountains ringed in mist. A mason places a stone slightly askew, the fit imperfect. The wall stands for now, but seasons later, rains will find the gap and wear it down. You run your fingers over the cool granite, feeling the roughness where most stones are smooth. The wind smells of earth and rain, and something sweet from a distant flower. A little further through time, you are in a modern airport office. In 1983, fluorescent lights buzzing. A technician watches a screen tracking signals. A blip appears, maybe a missile, maybe not. He hesitates, checks again, and decides it is a false alarm. He is right, but his superior, distracted and tired, almost overrules him. You stand in the corner, feeling the stale air against your skin, watching faces illuminated by the soft glow of monitors. The decision saves millions, though no one will ever cheer for it. The room remains calm, humming with quiet tension. You step onto a sandy shore in ancient Polynesia. The ocean breathes steadily, waves soft against the reef. Navigators gather, marking the stars with sticks in the sand. A young apprentice misremembers a constellation, and a canoe sets off too early, chasing a season that is not ready. You help them push the canoe into the water, feeling the salt spray against your cheeks, the sun warm on your back. They wave, laughing, unaware of the error. Weeks later, stories will be told of storms and narrow escapes. But here in this moment, the gulls cry and the sea is calm. Time folds softly again. You are in a quiet New England town in the 1800s, in a small schoolhouse where a teacher marks attendance on a slate board. She skips a name thinking the child is ill, but the family has moved away. In decades to come, historians will puzzle over census records, missing pieces of lives, trying to understand who was where and why. You sit at a desk running your hand over the worn wood, listening to the soft scratch of chalk and the distant call of birds through the open window. The light is warm and golden on the floor. Through all these places, you notice the sameness. Beneath the differences, the quiet hum of daily life, the softness of ordinary sounds, the small mistakes born of human hands and tired minds. The air around you feels still, now heavy with centuries of choices. You let out a slow breath. The night feels deeper, your body softer against the mattress or chair where you sit listening. The rhythm of history continues like a heartbeat, gentle and endless. And And soon you will step again into yet another time and place, drifting as softly as a leaf on a quiet stream. You sit on a low stone, watching camels sway by the bells on their necks, chiming softly, and think of how fragile armies are when built on human numbers. Time carries you into a smoky tavern in London, 1805. The room smells of ale and wet wool, the tables scarred from years of elbows and knives. A man in a navy coat leans over a map, plotting a course for a convoy. He misreads the tide chart, distracted by drink, and ships will run aground in the night. You rest your chin in your hand, listening to the soft buzz of conversation, the clink of mugs, the creak of the floorboards. Outside, rain patters gently on the cobblestones. The lantern light flickers, and you drift again, finding yourself in a monastery library high in the Alps, where monks speak in whispers, and the only sound is the steady scratch of quills. A brother leans too close to a candle, setting fire to the corner of an ancient text. They stamp it out quickly, but pages are lost. You run your fingers over the remaining script, feeling the grooves pressed by hands long gone. Snow falls outside the narrow window, silent and patient. Now you are walking along a levee in 1927 Louisiana. The river is swollen brown and restless. Men in overalls hammer boards into place, their boots sinking into the mud. Orders come from far away to dynamite a section, hoping to save the city downstream, but they do not warn the towns nearby. You stand with farmers as they watch the water rise, the smell of wet earth thick in your nostrils. When the levee breaks, the sound is like a sigh, slow and inevitable. You help lift a child into a boat, feeling the cold water soak your trousers. Weeks later, newspapers call it a disaster, but here in this moment, it is simply the smell of river water and the faint cry of a cow stranded on a hill. The wind shifts again, and you are in a small office in Cape Canaveral, 1967. Engineers sit hunched over consoles, coffee cups scattered among cables. The air smells faintly of ozone and burnt dust. A checklist is read aloud, one line missed, one test skipped. Hours later, flames will flash inside a capsule. You stand by the window watching the sun set over the launch pad, unaware that you are breathing in the last calm hours of those lives. The hum of fluorescent lights fills your ears, steady, hypnotic. You move quietly onward, finding yourself in a Persian garden centuries ago, the air fragrant with roses and citrus blossoms. Scholars sit on rugs beneath the shade of tall cypress trees, debating astronomy. One writes down a calculation, certain he has accounted for everything. You watch him blow gently on the ink to dry it. That small error will guide caravans by stars that lead them off course for generations. You pluck a petal from a rose and watch it fall onto the patterned rug, soft as breath. The sun fades, and you are in Berlin again, but this time in 1939. The air is heavy with the scent of coal smoke. You stand in a small room where officials draft decrees, shuffling papers with tired hands. One paragraph added hastily seals the fate of countless people. Outside, the streetcars rattle by, and somewhere a baker dusts flour onto fresh loaves. The contrast is sharp, yet quiet, ordinary life, and unthinkable decisions separated by only a wall. The candlelight dims, and you step onto a dusty road in 1870s South America. The cicadas hum in the trees as you walk past farmers leading mules loaded with sugarcane. A local governor underestimates a rebellion, dismisses warnings, and you watch soldiers march away without proper maps or food. You share a cup of water with a young boy who watches them go eyes wide, unaware of how soon they will return, broken and beaten. The sun lowers the shadows, stretch, and you smell sweet smoke from burning fields. Then you are back in a quieter place, a medieval scriptorium in Ireland, where monks hum hymns as they work. A sudden draft scatters precious vellum sheets, and one tumbles into the hearth. The monk sighs, shakes his head, and begins again. You pick up a scrap, the ink still wet, and feel the weight of words that will never be finished. Outside, sheep bleat softly in the fog. You stand and stretch your joints, creaking like old wood. Through each place, each century, you have walked slowly, seen errors as they are born not in thunder, but in murmurs, in sighs, in the casual stroke of a pen. And now you pause. The night around you feels deeper, the weight of these moments resting gently on your shoulders. You take a slow breath. The world feels still, and when you are ready, you will move on again. You linger in that Irish scriptorium a little longer, watching the soft glow of tallow candles melt into tiny puddles of wax. Then the scene turns like a page. You are standing on a wide plain in Africa, the air shimmering with heat. The year is late in the 19th century. A line of men and women walk slowly under the sun, carrying baskets of grain to a colonial outpost. Their faces are calm, but in the distance, you hear the low rumble of officials making decisions without listening to them. A new tax is levied without understanding the cycles of planting and harvest, and you feel the ripple of it as fields are abandoned, trade disrupted, and famine follows. But here in this moment, the air smells of dry grass and distant rain. A child runs barefoot past you laughing, and you crouch to touch the earth, feeling its warmth. The error is invisible to the day, but time will reveal its weight. You step forward and suddenly you are on a cold platform in St. Petersburg, 1917. Steam hisses softly from a waiting train. You stand among workers, their coats patched and frayed, their breath hanging in the icy air. A minister inside a nearby office dismisses their pleas, waving off the warnings of unrest. You watch him sign a memo, his pen scratching softly against the paper. Hours later, the crowd outside swells, and the course of an empire bends. But here for now, you listen to the low murmur of voices, the clink of coins in a vendor's hand as he sells hot tea in tin cups. The tea smells faintly of cloves, comforting against the bitter cold. Time bends again. You are crouched on the edge of a trench in the American Civil War. The air is damp, smelling of wet earth and gunpowder. A courier delivers an order, scrawled in haste, the handwriting hard to read. A captain misinterprets the words and leads his men into a foggy wood. You watch them disappear between the trees, their boots squelching in the mud. Hours later, the shouts of confusion rise, but here in this moment, all you hear is the soft buzz of insects and the occasional distant crow. The stream of time carries you onward, and now you are in the glow of a dimly lit room in Kyoto, early 20th century. Shoji screens slide quietly as the evening wind stirs. You sit on a tatami mat near an open window. Outside, the cherry blossoms are nearly gone, their petals scattered across the courtyard like pale confetti. A railway official sits cross-legged at a low table, tallying schedules under a flickering oil lamp. His hand moves steadily, then falters. He writes the wrong hour. You hear him sigh softly and stretch his neck, unaware that his numbers will cause two trains to meet on the same track. But tonight everything is still. You sip warm tea, letting its bitterness linger, and listen to the distant sound of frogs in the garden pond. The scene shifts, and you are standing beside a vast wooden scaffolding in medieval Spain, where workers raise a cathedral spire into the clouded sky. The scent of sawdust and wet mortar fills the air. Tents glow faintly in the moonlight, and you feel the cool earth beneath you. Time sways, and you are now in a low adobe building in early 20th century Mexico. The air smells of tortillas and dry corn. In the corner, a government clerk copies property records, swatting at flies. His pen hovers over a number uncertain. He shrugs, writes it down. Families will fight over that number decades later, But right now the room is warm, quiet, and filled with the sound of chickens scratching outside the open door. A little boy plays with a carved wooden horse on the dirt floor, humming to himself. You rise, brushing dust from your hands, and walk out into sunlight that smells of sage and warm stone. Then you find yourself beneath the iron ribs of the Eiffel Tower during its construction. Riveters work high above their hammers, ringing softly against steel. Below, an engineer sketches a load calculation on a slate, wiping sweat from his brow. His chalk squeaks, leaving a crooked line, but no one notices. You walk through piles of bolts and beams, feeling the vibration of distant strikes through your soles, smelling the tang of metal in the air. Above, clouds drift lazily, the city buzzing quietly beyond the work site. The tower will hold, despite this misstep, but you imagine the breath held by all who will ascend it, trusting in every calculation. The light changes, and you are sitting at a small desk in a dim room in 1986, somewhere in Central Europe. The wallpaper is faded, and the clock ticks with a hollow echo. A government inspector writes a report on a reactor dismissing a concern too quickly. He sets down his pen, rubs his temples, and pours himself coffee. The aroma mingles with the faint smell of paper and dust. Outside, a tram rattles past its bell, soft and melodic. Children shout faintly in a courtyard. The night deepens, and you watch the inspector seal his envelope, unaware of the quiet disaster brewing. Time folds again, and you are in a narrow alley in old Istanbul. Lanterns sway in the warm breeze, and the smell of roasting chestnuts fills the air. A map maker in a small shop traces a river incorrectly on a new chart. He leans back satisfied, sipping strong tea from a curved glass. You watch his hand rest on the worn wooden counter, ink stains marking his fingers. Merchants call out in the distance, and somewhere a muezzin's call drifts over the rooftops, soft as a lullaby. You step back into the alley feeling the rough cobblestones underfoot and watch cats wind around your ankles. Another turn, and you are in a quiet American office in 1929, late afternoon sunlight slanting through blinds. The air smells faintly of tobacco and paper. A stockbroker leans back in his chair, tapping numbers on a ledger. He shrugs off a warning, waves a hand at a colleague, confident the market will rise forever. You sit on a worn leather couch, feeling the cracked surface under your palms, watching the golden dust float in the light. Outside, streetcars clang softly, and you hear the rhythmic footsteps of people heading home. The broker smiles at a telegram and leaves for the day, unaware of the storm waiting in the weeks ahead. You close your eyes, letting the hum of the city surround you. Then you are crouched on a grassy hill in ancient Gaul, watching Roman engineers survey land. Their measuring ropes stretch taut across uneven ground, and one man marks a stake in the wrong place. The others nod, moving on, and you hear the soft swish of their tunics in the breeze. Centuries later, archaeologists will puzzle over odd alignments, but today, the hills are alive with bees and the faint scent of wild thyme. A shepherd passes with a staff, whistling to his dog, unaware of anything but the weather. Time carries you gently into the humid night of 1975 Saigon. The streets hum with mopeds, the air filled with the scent of noodle broth and exhaust. In a cramped office, someone files a report, incorrectly sending a list of evacuees to the wrong contact. You lean against a doorway, feeling the sweat bead on your skin, watching ceiling fans spin lazily. A woman at a desk straightens her papers, unaware of how urgently those names will be needed later. Outside, neon signs flicker in the warm darkness, and a distant radio plays a slow, mournful song. You step through and find yourself in a medieval village in Poland. The cobblestone streets are damp from rain, and the scent of wet hay hangs in the air. A blacksmith leans over a forge, hammering gently. While in the adjacent counting house, a tax collector forgets a figure and signs his ledger. You watch the ink seep into the page, the candlelight glowing soft on his hands. Outside, children laugh as they splash in puddles their wooden toys, clacking softly on the stones. And then you're in a quiet laboratory in modern Japan, watching engineers test a new train system. One wire is mislabeled, but no one notices in the steady rhythm of routine. You sip green tea, offered by an assistant, the steam warming your face, and listen to the distant hum of machinery. Outside, sakura petals drift across the parking lot, soft as snow. Through all these places, you're a quiet observer. You see how mistakes are born, not in storms and shouts, but in these moments, tired hands, hurried thoughts, soft sighs over candlelight. The wind shifts and you feel yourself returning, stepping out of history's soft current and into the present. The night around you is peaceful, now filled with the gentle weight of countless human stories. You feel your shoulders ease your breath, slow and even. And as you rest, you sense that even in our errors, there is a rhythm, a quiet humanity that binds all times together. The stream of history whispers softly, carrying you towards sleep. You rest in that peaceful hum of history for a long breath, then the air shifts once again. Now you are standing on a sun-baked road outside ancient Carthage. The dust is soft beneath your sandals, the horizon shimmering. Merchants carry amphorae of oil and wine, their carts creaking gently. In a shaded courtyard nearby, two officials argue over ledgers. One, distracted by the heat, writes down the wrong tribute amount. You hear the scratch of his reed pen, the faint buzz of flies in the warm air. Years later, that misrecorded debt will be used as a reason for war. But today, the only sound is the steady clop of donkey hooves and the distant scent of crushed olives. You lean against a sun-warmed wall, breathing in the dry air, and feel the moment pass like a breeze. Time folds softly, and you are in a quiet Swedish fishing village, 18th century. The sea stretches pale and calm, dotted with small wooden boats. You watch fishermen untangle nets, their fingers quick and sure. In a small cabin, a mapmaker sketches channels and reefs. A single rock is marked in the wrong place. You trace the drawing with your finger, feeling the rough texture of the paper, smelling the salt drying in your hair. Months later, a vessel will run aground in a foggy night, but now you only hear gulls crying and the soft slap of water against hulls. You step through time again and find yourself in a Roman granary, the air thick with the scent of grain and straw. Workers shovel grain into sacks, their movements rhythmic, almost musical. An overseer, eager to finish, miscounts the sacks. His error will leave soldiers hungry on a distant campaign. You sit on a wooden beam, feeling the warmth of the sun through a small window, listening to the muffled laughter of workers, sharing a joke in low voices. Outside, swallows swoop through the bright air. Time bends again, and you are in an Ottoman palace, a quiet side room where scribes copy decrees. The ink glistens as they work by lamplight. One scribe, distracted by fatigue, misses a line of instructions. You watch his quill hover, then move on. The letter is sealed with red wax carried away by a servant, whose sandals scuff softly on the polished tiles. Outside, the scent of jasmine drifts from the gardens, and the hum of a fountain soothes the night. Centuries shift, and you find yourself on the dry plains of Australia during early colonial times. The sun is fierce, the wind carrying the scent of eucalyptus. Surveyors stand with long measuring rods, marking boundaries they only half understand. A single turn of the compass is off by a degree, and towns will be placed awkwardly, roads built at strange angles. But right now, a kookaburra laughs in the trees, and you watch an ant crawl along your boot. The men wipe sweat from their brows, laugh about nothing in particular, and move on, leaving their mistake behind in the dust. Time carries you further to the muted interior of a Parisian art studio in the 19th century. The walls are lined with canvases, the air smelling of turpentine and damp cloth. A painter drafts a map of fortifications for a friend, absent-mindedly inking the wrong gate. You stand by a window, watching carriages rattle by on cobbled streets, hearing the distant clip-clop of hooves. Later, a commander will rely on that sketch and choose the wrong path. But today, the painter hums softly to himself, the light soft on his cheek. You step gently onward and find yourself in a stone tower overlooking the fields of medieval England. The watchman peers through the dusk eyes heavy from long hours. He mistakes a cloud of birds for approaching riders and sends a signal too early. You rest your arms on the cool stone parapet, listening to the wind whistle through the arrow slits. Below, peasants lead cows home, their voices carrying softly on the breeze. A foreman, distracted by the chatter of apprentices, gives a wrong angle. The timber creaks softly, not enough to alarm anyone. You place your hand on the rough beam, feeling the vibration as hammers strike. Years from now, this section will collapse, but today, sunlight filters through the scaffolding, and a mason offers you a crust of bread still warm from his lunch. The world turns, and you are in a cluttered study in Moscow in the early 1960s. Dust dances in the shafts of light from tall windows. Maps are pinned to walls, and the air smells of paper and old wool. A translator works quietly at a desk, converting instructions from one language to another. A single word mistranslated will shift an entire plan, sending equipment to the wrong place. You stand behind him, watching his hand tremble slightly as he writes. Outside, the snow begins to fall, blanketing the city in soft white silence. You step out onto a balcony in Constantinople during the Ottoman era. No one knows yet that troops will be moved unnecessarily, resources wasted, because of this one tired moment. The light shifts and you are in a dusty tent on the edge of the Sahara again, but now it is a French colonial outpost. A young officer reviews supply lists by lamplight. His pencil scratches steadily until a tired hand writes the wrong digit. You watch him rub his temples, unaware of the lives that will depend on this page. Outside, camels grunt softly, and the scent of strong coffee lingers in the air. A breeze lifts the tent flap, and the stars glitter like cold sparks above. Time folds, and you are in a New York stockroom in the early 1900s. Boxes are stacked high, labels curling in the humidity. A shipping clerk, distracted by the rhythm of a passing train, misplaces an order slip. Somewhere far away, a factory waits for parts that never arrive. You sit on a crate, feeling the wood press into your legs, and watch sunlight creep across the floorboards as the day drifts by. Later, when the factory shuts down, no one will think of this quiet room filled with dust motes and the smell of rope and paper. You walk further and step into a stone chamber in ancient Greece. Philosophers debate under flickering torches, the air warm with the smell of oil lamps. A student writes notes, miscopying a theorem. His peers nod as he reads it aloud, not noticing. Centuries later, mathematicians will struggle to reconcile the error, but here and now, laughter echoes softly. Sandals scrape against the floor, and the night is gentle. The world shifts again. You are on a quiet Italian hill in the Renaissance, watching builders lay the foundation of a bridge. The master builder glances at his plans, shrugs at a minor miscalculation, and waves the workmen on. You feel the sun on your neck, hear the clink of chisels, smell the earth freshly turned. The river below glimmers, carrying small leaves downstream. Years from now, the bridge will need costly repairs, but this morning is calm, timeless. You move softly on, and now you stand in a field hospital during the Crimean War. The air is sharp with antiseptic and smoke. Nurses move quietly, their skirts brushing against the cots. A supply officer records numbers in a ledger, but he's too tired, his figures overlap. A shipment of bandages will go astray, but now you only hear the low murmur of voices and the rhythmic creak of beds. You stand near a window watching snow fall beyond, muffling the distant rumble of guns. Another turn in time, and you are in an old stone fortress in northern Africa. Commander studies a map by lamplight, the scent of camel leather and sweat thick in the air. He places markers incorrectly, leading scouts to the wrong well. You sit cross-legged on a rug, sipping sweet tea offered by a soldier, and watch the flicker of the flame against the walls. Outside, the wind sighs against the stone, carrying grains of sand like whispers. Through each place, each moment, you notice the pattern, the smallness of the action, the vastness of the consequence, the ordinariness of the people behind it. There are no grand fanfares here, only sighs, scratches of pens, tired eyes glancing at papers in dim light. You feel yourself soften as you walk through these histories, each mistake a reminder of human frailty and human continuity. The night around you is deep, now quiet, the weight of these stories like a warm blanket. You breathe in slow and steady, and exhale, feeling yourself relax even further. The stream of time carries on, gentle and endless, as you close your eyes and let the rhythm of ordinary lives and their quiet errors guide you deeper into rest. You linger in that field hospital a little longer, feeling the lantern light tremble in the drafts that slide through canvas seams. Then, as if someone gently turned a page, you are in the dusty courtyard of an old Persian caravanserai. The year is perhaps the 13th century. Merchants in robes of faded indigo and ochre unload their goods, stacking rugs and jars of honey against sun-warmed walls. A tired scribe sits cross-legged in the shade, tallying weights on a wax tablet. His stylus hesitates. A figure is skipped. He does not notice. That single oversight will mean a caravan leaves underfunded, a journey delayed. But here in this courtyard, you hear the coo of pigeons in the rafters and smell the rich smoke of bread baking in a clay oven. Someone offers you a cup of warm milk, and you feel it settle in your stomach, calm and steady. Time shifts softly, and you find yourself on a cliffside in early medieval Ireland. The wind hums through gorse bushes, carrying the scent of salt and damp earth. Monks stand near a stone chapel, their robes flapping in the wind as they copy scripture. One brother, cold and weary, omits a line without realizing it. Centuries from now, scholars will argue over a missing verse. You lean against a weathered stone, watching seabirds wheel in the gray sky. Their calls echo against the cliffs, rhythmic, almost like chanting. The scene melts, and now you are in a dim, candlelit room in Renaissance Venice. The air smells of wax ink and faint seawater drifting in through the shutters. A cartographer bends over his maps, tracing coastlines with meticulous care. Outside, a gondola glides softly by the oar, dipping in and out of the lagoon with a gentle splash. The mapmaker's hand trembles slightly from exhaustion, and he sketches a cape too far south. Generations of captains will trust his mistake. You sit on a stool, feeling the worn wood under your fingers, and watch him sprinkle sand over wet ink, humming an old song that wavers like the candle flame. Another breath, and you are in a dusty archive in Ottoman Cairo. The room is lined with scrolls and bound volumes, their spines cracked, smelling of time itself. A record keeper squints at a shipment list, adding a flourish that turns a 7 into a 1. You stand in the corner, the coolness of the stone wall against your shoulder, listening to the distant call of a street seller hawking figs. Somewhere outside, a donkey brays. Inside, history quietly veers off its path unnoticed. Time slides further, and you are on the deck of a Dutch East India Company ship in the 17th century. The ocean stretches in all directions, endless and steady. The air is thick with tar and salt. A young officer calculates distance with a sundial and log squinting against the glare. He marks the numbers in his ledger, unaware of a slip in the math. You watch sailors knot ropes, their fingers deft and calloused humming shanties that blend with the sound of waves against wood. At night, lanterns swing in the breeze, casting gentle light across tired faces. Then you are in a modest stone house in Florence. The air is warm with the scent of rosemary and garlic from the kitchen below. A notary records property lines for a family dispute. His mind drifts as church bells ring, and his hand wavers, drawing the wrong boundary. You trace the ink drying on the page, with your eyes hearing laughter from children playing in the courtyard. Their voices rise and fall like birdsong. You look out a window and see laundry swaying gently in the breeze, bright against the pale stone walls. The air is thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts and fresh bread. Below, the Grand Bazaar hums with life vendors, calling softly fabrics, rustling like water coins chiming. In a nearby office, an official miscounts the weight of shipments, leading to shortages far from here. You lean against the railing, watching the lanterns glow like distant stars, listening to the low hum of countless voices. You smile at a child chasing a stray cat through the crowd, unaware of anything beyond this moment. Time folds again, and you are in a small French village during the building of the Maginot Line. The air smells faintly of wet cement and spring grass. A soldier on leave walks past with a loaf of bread under his arm, humming a tune. In a nearby office, plans are drawn with care, but miss the forest that will one day guide an invasion. You crouch in the grass, watching a ladybug climb a blade, the hum of bees in your ears, and wonder how people can build so carefully and yet overlook so much. The light changes and you stand in a silent hall of a Mayan temple centuries ago. Incense coils drift lazily, mixing with the scent of earth and stone. A priest counts offerings, murmuring numbers as another scratches them into bark paper. A word is misheard and a figure wrong. Rituals will change, records will be skewed. Yet here in this moment, the temple is peaceful, the jungle beyond humming with cicadas. You run your fingers over a carved lintel, feeling the grooves of glyphs under your hand, and hear the distant splash of water from a cenote. You step softly through time and find yourself in a small Russian village during a long winter. The snow muffles every sound, and smoke rises from chimneys in thin gray ribbons. In a log cabin, an old man keeps the church records. His candle sputters as he writes, skipping a name by mistake. Centuries later, families will wonder why their ancestors vanish from those pages. But in this quiet cabin, you hear only the crackle of a fire and the soft turning of pages, each one rough under his fingers. Another breath, another shift. You are in a cramped room in Washington, D.C., during the early days of space exploration. Engineers sit over stacks of calculations, pencils tapping on tables. Someone converts pounds to kilograms, incorrectly a small note lost in the hum of conversation. You lean against a cabinet smelling machine oil and paper. Outside, night settles over the city, and the glow from the street lamps filters softly through blinds. Inside, they speak in low tones, unaware that their work will send a craft off course millions of miles away. Time flows again, and now you are in a tea house in late Qing China. The wooden beams creak softly as you sit on a low stool. Steam curls from your cup, fragrant with jasmine. A provincial official tallies grain shipments on a bamboo slip, distracted by conversation. He writes a digit twice. In years to come, that will lead to shortages and unrest. But now the air is filled with the gentle sound of tea being poured and the scent of roasted seeds. Outside, lanterns sway gently in the evening breeze. Another soft step, and you are on a high balcony in a French chateau as the 18th century fades toward revolution. The gardens below are meticulously kept fountains whispering as dusk settles. Inside, nobles play cards and speak lazily of new taxes. A scribe miscopies a figure in the tax register, setting off confusion in villages that are already hungry. You feel the polished stone beneath your hand, hear laughter from the salons below. Smell perfume, mingling with the scent of candle smoke. You drift onward, finding yourself in a mission school in early 20th century Africa. The air is dry, the chalk dust thick, as the teacher marks attendance on a wooden slate. She skips a row, not seeing a child who sat silently in the back. His name fades from records, though his life will ripple through generations. Outside, the sun sets in a blaze of orange and purple, and you hear distant drums carried on the wind. The stream of time moves again, and you are in an ancient Roman bath, the sound of splashing water echoing softly. Merchants talk business in low voices, steam drifting like veils around them. One man nods, agreeing to a shipment he hasn't properly checked. Coins change hands, plans are made, and you lean back against the smooth stone, feeling the warmth seep into your skin. Outside the city, hums vendors closing their stalls, the smell of baking bread drifting through the air. Another step, and you are in a quiet Tokyo office in the 1960s. Paper files stack high, and an overworked clerk misfiles an important patent. You hear the rhythmic stamping of documents, the soft murmur of telephones ringing in the background. He rubs his eyes, unaware that his mistake will cost a company dearly years later. Outside, the neon lights flicker to life as night falls, and somewhere far below the window, someone whistles an old tune, slow and wistful. Through all these places, you feel the same rhythm. Tired minds, soft sounds, tiny oversights carried forward on the tide of human life. None of it is loud in this moment. Each one is wrapped in the ordinary, the hum of insects, the warmth of bread, the scratch of pen on paper. The lanterns flicker on stone walls. You breathe in slowly, deeply, and let the calm weight of these countless moments settle over you. History hums like a lullaby, soft and unending as you rest in its gentle flow. Another step carries you to an ancient Chinese court. The emperor sits on a raised dais, listening to petitions with a calm face. Courtiers bow and speak softly. A single miscommunication between two ministers sets rival clans against each other. You stand in the shadow of a red pillar, breathing in the scent of incense, hearing the rustle of silk robes as officials move past. Outside in the palace gardens, koi swim in circles under falling petals. Time flows, and you find yourself on a ship leaving Marseille, 18th century. The deck sways gently, the sails snapping softly in the breeze. Below deck, crates of food are inventoried. A clerk forgets to mark a shipment of fresh water. The captain nods at the number's content. You sit on the railing, feeling the salt air on your skin, listening to gulls cry, and you see children waving from the dock as the ship drifts out. Far later in mid-ocean, thirst will haunt them, but here there is only the glitter of sunlight on waves. Another step, another time. You are in a quiet archive in Alexandria, not the grand library, but a smaller room with clay tablets stacked on shelves. A storm rages outside, wind whistling through cracks in the stone. A young apprentice, eager to impress, sets a tablet too close to a dripping leak. Over days, the water seeps in, erasing lines of text written generations ago. You run your fingers over the damp clay, feeling the grooves that remain, and hear the distant rumble of thunder. Now you stand in a field in 19th century Prussia. Farmers work in the distance, their voices low and melodic as they sing. In a nearby military encampment, an officer writes orders with calm precision, unaware he is using the wrong map. You lean against a fence, feeling the rough wood beneath your hand, and watch clouds gather in the gray sky. Horses snort, softly stamping their hooves. You turn slowly, and now you are in a small mission settlement in California, the air filled with the scent of oranges and sun-warmed earth. A record keeper writes names in a register, his hand tired, spelling them as he hears them. Generations later, descendants will search for their history and find gaps, confusion, a tangle of errors. You sit beneath an olive tree, feeling the rough bark at your back, and listen to the distant bells calling the workers in for the evening meal. Time bends, and you find yourself in a German field during the early days of Operation Barbarossa. The air is hot-heavy with the scent of grass and sweat. A commander marks a position incorrectly on a map, sending a unit into terrain they cannot cross. You watch soldiers drink water from dented canteens, leaning against their trucks, unaware of the hardship waiting beyond the next rise. The breeze stirs, carrying the distant hum of insects. Another turn and you are in a quiet archive in modern times, air conditioners humming softly. A historian sifts through boxes of old documents, scanning fragile pages. One is mislabeled decades ago, leading her search astray. You stand beside her, smelling the faint mustiness of old paper, listening to the soft flutter as she turns a page. Outside, the afternoon sun glows against glass windows, warm and still. The journey winds toward its close. You step into a vast hall in Vienna, 1815. The Congress of Vienna hums with voices, glasses clinking softly as diplomats argue borders. A misread clause in a treaty plants seeds for later unrest. You stand at the edge of the room, touching the velvet curtain, feeling the texture beneath your fingertips. A violinist plays softly in the next room, the music carrying gently on the air, mingling with laughter and low conversation. And then, as though you've been walking a long road in dreams, you find yourself back in the present. All around you are the echoes of countless small decisions, quiet errors, overlooked details. Each one a pebble dropped into the wide river of time. You feel calm now, wrapped in these memories of distant lives and gentle nights. The air around you is soft, the rhythm of history, like a slow heartbeat. You close your eyes, breathing evenly, and let yourself drift, knowing the past is vast and full of human hands, steady and flawed, building the world you rest in tonight. You linger in that great hall in Vienna, a moment longer, letting the violin notes melt into the air like candle wax. Then the walls dissolve, and you are standing on the windswept stones of an old lighthouse in Brittany, sometime in the late 19th century. The sea rolls slowly below its surface, silver under a pale sky. A keeper in a heavy coat hauls a bucket of oil, humming under his breath. He checks the schedule for the light rotation, but skips a line thinking he has already tended that lantern. You stand beside him on the narrow stairway, feeling the chill of the stone through your boots, watching him wind the mechanism with practiced hands. He smiles faintly at the thought of his wife in the village, and you step out onto the platform, tasting salt on the breeze. Ships pass in the distance, unaware that by nightfall this light will not turn in time. Another soft step through time, and you're in a Mongolian encampment centuries ago. The wind hums over the grassy plain, and the scent of smoke from cooking fires drifts through the air. Horses graze nearby, their tails flicking lazily. A group of riders huddle around a small table, poring over trade agreements. A scribe mistranslates a phrase of respect into something careless. Days later, an insulted governor seizes goods and kills merchants, and the world shifts. But here, in this moment, you sip fermented mare's milk from a wooden bowl, listening to the murmur of men and the rustle of the endless steppe grass.